Hey there, viewers. The courtroom was already tense, but everything changed the moment Diddy's adopted daughter took the stand. Her testimony hit harder than anyone expected, and by the time she finished, Diddy had completely collapsed. What she revealed left the entire room in shock. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. I was never claimed, just borrowed. They told me to sit in this little gray room until someone came to get me. The walls are the kind you don't remember after you leave. Flat, soundless, like someone scrubbed all the history off of them. There's a table in the middle, metal legs, one edge uneven so it ticks when I rest my elbow. I don't think they meant to make it uncomfortable, I just think they don't care. I haven't spoken to anyone today except for the man who walked me through the metal detector. He asked if I had anything sharp or electronic, and I said no. He didn't look at me again after that. That's how it usually is. You pass through checkpoints like a piece of paper, not a person, especially when you're not really anyone official. I was never adopted, not legally, not in court, not even in whispers. I was just around, just there. It started when I was 11, maybe 12. I don't know how old I really was the first time I was brought to the house. It was the big one, the one with the long driveway that curves like it's trying to confuse you. I remember the windows tinted so dark that you could never tell if someone was watching you from behind them. That was the point, I think. You never knew who was watching, so you acted like everyone was. They didn't introduce me with my name. They called me the quiet one. Like that was a compliment, like it meant I belonged. The first time I heard it, one of the other girls was crying about having to redo her hair again, and someone said, "Why can't you be more like the quiet one?" They meant me. I wasn't being quiet because I was good. I was quiet because I was afraid of saying something that would make me disappear. There were parties. Not birthday parties, not the kind with balloons or cake or games. These were cold. Glass tables, too many mirrors, music that made your chest feel tight even when it wasn't loud. They said they were fashion events or launches, but there were rules no kid should have had to memorize. Don't walk between the curtain and the man with the clipboard. Don't touch the bottles even if they look like water, and don't go into the white room unless someone asks you to. No one ever explained what the white room was, but one girl did go in, once. She came back out and didn't talk again for 2 days. My job was to help with the twins. That's what they told me. I'd fix their hair sometimes or keep them company while they got their photos taken. At first I thought I was lucky. They gave me gifts sometimes. Bracelets, sneakers, little things with logos that looked expensive. But they never asked me what I liked. They never said they were proud of me. It was more like I was a prop they could use when someone needed the girls to look like they had friends. I figured that out the day I saw a photo of one of the shoots, all printed out and framed in the hallway. I had been there. I remembered standing just behind the curtain, but in the photo, I wasn't there at all. There was this one woman who always stood on the second floor landing during those photos. She wore heels so tall I thought she must have practiced walking in them for years. She didn't say much, but when she did, everyone listened. She always had a folder in her hand and a little earpiece. She looked like she belonged in charge, but I don't know what she actually did. One day, she just wasn't there anymore. I asked someone where she went. They said, "Which woman?" I didn't ask again. Everything in that house had a rhythm, a strange, slow kind of rhythm. Some days everything would go fast. People running in and out, bags being packed, phones ringing. Other days, it was so quiet you'd think the whole place had stopped breathing. Those were the days I hated most. Because on those days, they looked at you longer, measured you, like they were trying to decide if you still belonged here, like maybe you'd stopped being useful. I had to clean things sometimes too, not like chores at home. These were objects I wasn't supposed to ask about. I remember a box of headphones, all with broken wires, a tray of rings, all missing stones, a mirror that only showed your face if you stood at the exact right angle. I wiped them down, placed them in drawers. I didn't ask one time, I did, and the housekeeper said, "Don't look too long. Some things in this place remember." When they called me here, to this courthouse, they didn't even use my full name. The woman on the phone just said, "We need you to confirm your presence," like I was a receipt. A man knocked on the holding room door about 20 minutes ago. He didn't speak, just handed me a sealed envelope, cream-colored, thick. Inside was a single piece of paper, not even a full page, just a drawing. A spiral tucked inside a rough circle. No words, no date, but I recognized it. It was mine. I drew that. I was 13, maybe older. I don't know where I was when I made it, but I remember the way the pencil felt in my hand. I remember pressing harder on the corners, trying to get the curve just right. It wasn't for school. It wasn't for fun. It felt like something I needed to copy, like I'd seen it somewhere and had to get it down before I forgot. I asked the man where it came from. He shrugged and said it was found in a box marked private during the raid. Then he left. I didn't know they kept anything from me. I didn't know I had left anything behind. Sometimes I wonder if I really was there at all. There are no papers, no legal trail, no signature. But I remember too much for it to be made up. I remember the way the halls smelled like cold perfume. I remember the way the light bent through the upstairs windows in the morning, like it didn't want to come in. I remember being asked to smile, even when I didn't understand the joke. He would call me baby girl in front of people, make it sound sweet, safe, then forget I was in the room when it was time to hand out credits. When he talked about his kids, he meant the ones who were in the magazines, the ones with his face. I didn't have his face. I had a borrowed name, a borrowed dress, a borrowed room. You learn to become small in places like that, to shrink just enough to avoid being asked questions, but not so small that you get sent away. There's an art to being tolerated, a rhythm, and I kept it perfectly. Until now. Now they want me to speak. They want me to remember. Not for him, for the court, for the record, but records are made of facts, and people like me, we were never facts. We were background, decoration, the pause between the verses of a story someone else gets to tell. They think I'm here to testify against him. But I'm not. I'm not here for revenge. I'm not even here for justice. Here because someone found my spiral in a box that wasn't supposed to be opened, because someone wants to know where it came from, because I remember, and maybe that's all I was ever meant to do. You can't call it betrayal when you were never claimed. Just borrowed. Chapter 2. She. She was always around, but never in the pictures. The courtroom was closed to the public today. Not just closed, sealed, as in no audio feed, no clerks outside this wing allowed to step foot past checkpoint 4. I've worked federal hearings for nearly 11 years now, and I've only seen a level 5 seal invoked 3 times. Once was during a high-level witness relocation case, the second was during a closed-door military contractor dispute, and today was something else entirely. I wasn't told much. I rarely am. My job isn't to ask, it's to record, file, redact. But when a sealed witness is classified as a non-legal dependent, it raises eyebrows. That phrase doesn't even show up in most databases. It's usually reserved for people who existed on the edge of legality, foster system overflow, institutional gray zones, undocumented minors who never went through the right channels, ghosts with paper trails, no longer than their shadows. I was the one tasked with preparing the bench folders, defense copies, prosecution sets, judicial review binders. One of the exhibits marked D3 caught my eye, a stack of photographs, family archives to be used for character defense. They were glossy prints, studio polished, smiling faces, Kids in matching designer clothes, birthday balloons in the background. The kind of image meant to say, look how normal we were, look how much love lived here. But it was always the corners that told the truth. In the third photo, a birthday party from 2018, I think. The twins are standing next to their father, both holding wrapped presents. But just beside the table, behind the edge of a flower arrangement, a small hand reaches out, offering a gift. The sleeve of the jacket is different. Not designer, no visible face, just emotion, a gesture. Half seen. I checked the metadata, nothing unusual. But when I looked at the framed version of that same image submitted earlier by the defense, the hand was gone, cropped clean, seamless edit. I flipped to another. The studio session shot, Diddy's at the mic. Behind him, reflected in a glass panel that's slightly angled, there's someone sitting on the floor, legs crossed, sketchbook in lap. The face is invisible, just the outline. But something about it stuck with me. Stillness. That person wasn't just present, they were watching, carefully. I dug a little deeper into the supplemental evidence folder, looking for the original submission list. At the bottom, there was a sealed envelope labeled Household Presence Analysis. Tier 3 Witness, Unacknowledged. I should have passed it straight to the lead counsel. That's protocol, but I didn't. I opened it. Inside were printed notes, statements from former house staff, assistants, stylists, drivers, all anonymous. The structure of the document was clinical. Timestamps, bullet points, behavioral summaries. But what they described made my stomach tighten. Minor female present in household for extended periods between 2017-2022. No official record of guardianship. Not enrolled in school under family name. Attended private tutoring on site with security present. Assigned routine household tasks, including surveillance prep, wardrobe inventory, cleanup after adult-only events. Referred to as the recorder by multiple staff. Carried sketchbook. Rarely spoke. Appeared withdrawn but highly observant. The statements weren't allegations. They weren't even emotionally worded. That's what made them worse. They were cold, empty, like a machine describing a person. But then came a line that stopped me cold. Instructed to draw the room before you leave it. Not once. Repeatedly? Phrase used by household authority figures. Possibly encoded instruction. Reread it 3 times, draw the room before you leave it. What does that mean? Was it surveillance? Was it training? Was it art? Or something more insidious? A way of making a memory permanent without speaking it out loud? There was a short memo stapled to the back of the statement packet, dated February 2021, handwritten by a former assistant. No name, just initials. I don't know where she came from. I just know she was always there. Watching. She never asked for anything, never acted out. Sometimes, I think she saw more than she was supposed to. Sometimes, I think she knew what this place was really for. Once, after a performance night, I found her sketchbook left open in the hallway. It showed the room, the guests, the dancers, the man in the white mask, and the twins, in the middle of it, still smiling. I shouldn't have read that. I shouldn't have kept going, but I couldn't stop myself. There was another attachment, a scanned page from a sketchbook. The pencil lines were faint, childlike, but careful. Too careful. You could tell she had drawn it from memory, not imagination. It showed a couch, a woman on it, wearing sunglasses indoors, her legs crossed, hands gripping a wine glass. In the corner of the sketch, a tiny face, the observer, the girl. Not drawn fully, just enough to be noticed, watching from the floor again. Not part of the scene, but witnessing it. I flipped to the final document in the packet, a typed summary note from the lead analyst. Recorder girl equals key memory holder. Do not discredit. Her presence recurs across multiple timeline-confirmed events, despite total omission from legal family records. Cross-related with sketch metadata and sealed surveillance logs from Calabasas property Wing B. High likelihood of embedded observational role, voluntary or not. I sat back in my chair and realized I was sweating. My hands had gone numb. I looked at the time, almost noon. The testimony was starting in 15 minutes. I gathered the folders, returned the envelope to its seal, and walked them to the courtroom hallway. As I approached the door, two marshals were speaking softly with a woman. She was dressed plainly. Nothing about her looked high profile. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair wasn't styled. She didn't carry a bag. She looked like someone who knew how to not be noticed. I didn't speak to her. I wasn't supposed to. But as I passed, I saw what she was holding. A sketchbook, tucked under her arm like it had always been there. She didn't look nervous. She looked inevitable. I stepped into the courtroom and handed the folders to the judge's assistant. My hands trembled, but I don't think anyone noticed. As I sat down to begin transcribing, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Not the testimony, not the sketch, not even the files. It was that phrase again, that instruction. Draw the room before you leave it. And I wondered, how many rooms had she drawn? And how many people had no idea she was there, recording? She wasn't in the pictures, because the pictures weren't made for her. They were made to forget her, but she remembered everything. And now she was in the room, finally seen, finally called. They'd spent years cropping her out. But you can't crop out memory. Not when it knows how to draw. Chapter 3. Sheep drew the rituals from memory. The first thing she did when she sat down was place the sketchbook between us like it was an offering. She didn't speak, didn't look around the room, just pressed her palm flat against the cover and waited, like she knew I would ask her to open it eventually, like this was part of the script. I let the silence sit for a while. There's something sacred about the first 10 minutes of any evaluation. Most people squirm, they ask what they should say, they laugh too much or too little, but not her. She didn't fidget, she didn't lean back or cross her legs. She just sat still, spine straight, eyes focused on a corner of the floor, like it had told her a secret once. I introduced myself, quietly, told her I was court-assigned, not law enforcement, and that she wasn't obligated to answer anything she didn't want to, that I wasn't here to investigate her, just to understand her. Still nothing. So I asked about the sketchbook. She looked at me finally. Her eyes weren't cold or angry or even afraid, just tired, like she'd been carrying around a storm that never had the decency to break. Then, without a word, she opened the book. The drawings were unlike anything I've ever seen. Technically, they were amateur, drawn in pencil, some with smudged edges, shadows that didn't always fall correctly, but emotionally, they were exact. You could feel the rooms in them. The first page showed a hallway with 3 mirrors, each reflecting different angles of the same figure walking past. A man, maybe. Hard to say, but there was something wrong with the reflections. They didn't match. One showed him facing forward, one with his back turned. The last showed no face at all. The next page was a bedroom, sparse. Girls lying in twin beds, all facing away from the door. At the threshold, a group of men stood, watching, not touching, just standing there. One held a phone, one had a notepad. Their eyes were all empty ovals, no detail, as if the artist hadn't been allowed to look at them directly. Then came the image I think will stay with me the rest of my life. A man in a white mask, kneeling on a tiled floor. He was pouring something from a bottle onto the ground. Baby oil, it looked like. The liquid pooled into a rough circle, and inside it were shoes. Small ones, not worn, just placed, like props. She flipped through pages faster now. A stage set up in a room with no windows, lights hanging too low, curtains on all sides, a couch placed in the middle, facing nothing. Then a line of guests, all seated, all blindfolded, watching. Something. In the drawing, whatever they were watching was smudged, erased, maybe scratched out, like she'd tried to draw it and changed her mind. Or maybe she never wanted it to be remembered. I asked her if these were memories or dreams. She said, finally, they didn't want us to forget. That was the point. Her voice was quiet, hoarse, not rehearsed. I asked what she meant. She looked me in the eye and said, they made us practice stillness. They called it rehearsal. We'd lie down and pretend to sleep while they walked around us. Sometimes there were lights, sometimes there were sounds, but we couldn't move, couldn't flinch. That was part of it. I asked if anyone was harmed. She shook her head. Not like that. That wasn't the goal. Touching would ruin the performance. He wanted something else. He wanted to be remembered. He said, memory is obedience. I kept writing. In my margin, I scribbled, non-contact conditioning, symbolic dominance, ritualized surveillance. She turned to a different section of the sketchbook. The pages here were older, paper more worn, edges frayed like they'd been thumbed over hundreds of times. One page showed a basement stairwell. Stone walls, narrow. At the bottom, a heavy door with a keypad lock. She tapped the drawing. Under the Calabasas house, she said. He called it the trophy room. I asked what was kept there. She paused, thought, then, sketches, recordings, voice files, some clothes, all sorted by nickname, not by name. There were drawers, labeled things like Peach, Bellhop, July 4. I didn't know what they meant. I asked how many times she went down there. Once, she said. He let me see it. Said if I was going to draw the rooms, I might as well know where they ended up. Her hands were still resting on the sketchbook, steady, not trembling. She wasn't ashamed, wasn't trying to convince me. She was just telling me what had been. I flipped my legal pad and began a new section of notes. Patient exhibits. Deliberate recollection of traumatic material without emotional disruption. Detached affect, consistent with long-term dissociation. Non-linear memory sequencing, but high internal consistency. Strong visual recall under stress. Memory tethered to spatial environments. I noted that her responses were unprompted and visually anchored, that her drawings contained symbols corroborated by independent investigation reports, including the blindfolded guest configuration described during the tunnel search, and the audio distortion setup reported by tech staff. I closed my notebook and asked if she had been subpoenaed before. She looked surprised. No, they said I couldn't be on record, that I was unofficial. I stepped out to speak to the marshal stationed outside, asked if this was her first formal involvement. He nodded. She wasn't even on the public roster. We had her in a sealed document for 3 years, internal access only, witness type 3C. I asked why she was called now. He lowered his voice. The tunnels. Once they were confirmed, the suppressed file unlocked. She was listed under the conditional protocol, only to be contacted if the architecture matched her drawings. He paused, then added, it matched. I went back into the room and told her she could go, that I had what I needed. She nodded, picked up the sketchbook, and hugged it close to her chest, like it was armor or proof. As she reached the door, she turned back and said, "They always said drawing was harmless. That's why they let me do it." She paused, smiled, but not in joy, just knowing. But paper remembers better than people, and I never ran out of paper. She left the room, and I stood there alone for a long time. I'd spoken to victims before, to survivors, to liars too. I knew what coached trauma sounded like. I knew what panic looked like, but this was something else. Like she had seen through something and kept the pieces perfectly drawn, locked in her book until the world was finally ready to look. And the scariest part was that she hadn't drawn to report anything. She wasn't a witness trying to expose him. She had drawn to survive. Chapter 4. The first time he let me speak. I never imagined I'd be seated across from him like this. Not in a courtroom, not with the door shut behind me and the air so still it felt like fabric stretched too tight. The room was quiet. Not just quiet like silence, but quiet like everything had been wrapped in something thick and padded. No cameras, no audience, just the judge, a few legal observers, 2 marshals, and him. He didn't look the same as I remembered. I don't know if that's because time changed him, or if I never really saw him properly before. Maybe both. He was thinner, paler than I'd ever seen him, wearing a suit that looked like it had been picked by someone else. Too sharp, too pressed, like it was trying too hard to remind people who he used to be. His eyes flicked toward me once, then dropped away. He didn't look again. I was given a statement to read. They asked if I wanted help. I said no. I didn't need the paper, not really. I'd memorized every word the night before, whispering it over and over in a motel room with a towel under the door and the lights turned off. There was comfort in the dark. It reminded me of the white room. The only difference was that in the motel, I could choose when to stop. I looked straight ahead when I began, not at him. Not yet. The first time I was introduced as his daughter, I said I wasn't invited. I wasn't warned. I was in the house already, like always, sitting in the hallway, waiting to be told what to do next. Then someone called me into the den and said, "Come stand here for a second. Smile." There were lights, a phone lifted. I didn't know it was being broadcast. I didn't know millions of people would see it. I paused. The judge didn't move. No one did. He smiled because someone whispered, "Don't ruin the family." That was the only reason. I wasn't adopted. I wasn't loved. I was decoration, a label pinned to me like a ribbon for the night. I finally looked at him then. His fingers twitched once on the table. Still, he didn't meet my eyes. I went on. There were places in the house that had rules. Some doors stayed locked, some stayed open, but you never went through them without permission. The white room was different. It wasn't locked, but you didn't go there unless he said so. I could feel a shift in the room. One of the observers leaned forward slightly. The phrase had been in the FBI's files. They'd confirmed the room existed, but no one had spoken about what happened inside it. It was soundproof, I said. No windows, one bulb overhead. The floor had circles drawn in chalk, like performance marks. The walls were bare, except for a black square on the far side that looked like a vent, but wasn't. I swallowed. He only went in twice. The first time I was 13, he said I was old enough to hear the test. He didn't call it music. He called it frequency rehearsal. He said it would make me stronger, that it would teach me how to stay still when everything in me wanted to run. I looked at the judge, then back down at the table. He played a sound. Just one. Over and over. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't right either. It made my teeth hurt. Not my ears. My teeth, like they were shaking inside my skull. I tried to stay still. I tried not to cry, but after 7 minutes, I threw up on the floor. He made someone else clean it. My hand went instinctively to my bag. I pulled something out, carefully, without being asked. A single sketch. Folded. "This isn't part of the record," I said, but I brought it anyway. The judge hesitated, then nodded. One of the marshals stepped forward, but I handed it to the assistant instead. Lydia kept a copy for myself, unfolded it slowly, set it on the table in front of me, and tilted it so they could all see. It was him, drawn, standing alone in the white room. The lines were sharp, angled. His posture was stiff, arms crossed, his head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something that wasn't there. Above his head, I'd drawn a speech bubble, just 5 words inside. "Remember this for me." I looked up then, directly at him. His eyes met mine, for a second, maybe less, but enough. I could see the recognition flicker behind his expression. The mask cracked. Not fully, but enough to let something leak out. He trembled. Not all over, just his shoulders. A slight twitch, but it was real. He remembered. I leaned forward slightly. "You said those words to me," I said. "Not once, not twice, dozens of times. Remember this for me. When people came over, when I was sent to clean up, when someone new showed up at the house, wearing a dress too short and shoes too expensive to belong to someone my age. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint buzz of the security light above the door. You never told me to forget. You told me to remember, because you thought I belonged to you, because you thought memory was yours to shape." Sat back, rested my hands on the table again. "I never stopped drawing," I said. "I just stopped showing them." One of the observers shifted in their seat. The judge adjusted their glasses, but no one spoke. And Diddy, he leaned back slowly, shoulders still trembling, his hands now folded tightly in his lap, like he was holding something together. I didn't need to say anything else. I'd said what I came to say. I'd said it all. Chapter 5. The twin who tried to escape. Most days, my job doesn't carry this much weight. I draft motion responses, prep binder sets, update exhibit logs. I make sure the right pages are in the right hands before anyone opens their mouth on record. But today, I'm sitting alone in the records overflow office with the lights too dim and a stack of sealed files sweating against my palm. And for the first time in a long time, I'm scared of what I'm about to read. The courtroom still settling from her testimony. The girl with the sketchbook, the one they all swore didn't exist. Diddy's legal team spent the entire recess huddled in the defense wing, flipping through family files, phone logs, tax filings, everything and anything to prove she had no place in his world, no legal standing, no name on the record. She was never adopted, one of them hissed at me earlier. No documentation, no surname match, she's nobody. But the sketches were real. The white room existed. The storage drawer labeled bellhop matched a drawer found in the Calabasas basement during the second raid. And the girl's drawing of the spiral, of the man with the mask, of the circle of shoes, was too precise to fake. So now, I'm looking deeper. I have access clearance most people in this building don't, thanks to a procedural overlap in sealed juvenile records and federal protective services. It's not supposed to be used for this, but this isn't like anything else. The file I find is thin, barely 12 pages, titled simply, Incident Report, Twin A Location Breach, July 9, 2020. Inside is a witness log from LAPD. A minor was found at a public library near Hollywood Boulevard after hours. She had no ID, no wallet, and refused to give her last name. Security guard called it in. She was calm but exhausted. Said she wasn't trying to run away, just to rest where no one could watch her. That's what she told the officers. I just wanted to sleep without mirrors. The report notes her clothes were clean, no signs of distress, but her shoes didn't match. One sneaker, one slide-on slipper. When asked where she came from, she gave the name of the estate, not the family name, just the street. Then she asked for a book about forgetting. The odd part is what came next. The incident was closed within 6 hours. No official pickup noted, no parent signature, no social worker involvement. Just one line in the custody log. Minor retrieved by household personnel, accompanied. But in the margin, handwritten by the officer on duty, there's a note. She wasn't alone when she got here. Another girl walked her in, looked older, left as soon as security turned away, checked the shelves like she knew her way around, then vanished. No description, no name, just a trace, like someone passing through fog. I dig further into sealed attachments. There's security camera footage, time-stamped 8:03 p.m. The twin enters the lobby, dazed but calm. Just behind her, a second figure, thin, hoodie up, walking half a step behind. But in the next frame, less than 10 seconds later, she's gone. The next page hits harder. Internal memo, Tier 3 household observation, Twin A, psychological interference patterns, redacted version. The memo discusses abnormal sleep patterns, recurring dissociation episodes, and a list of banned locations within the estate. The music wing, the basement, the north hallway past 10 p.m. She was forbidden from sketching or journaling after a specific date, July 4th, 2020. The note says it was to reduce false memory formation. I freeze. July 4th. That's 5 days before she turned up in the library. Someone was trying to shut her down before she got out. The last page is stapled to a separate envelope labeled Forensic Sketch Recovery Bundle D. I open it and find photocopies. Drawings, rough but clear. One shows a girl crouched behind a vanity mirror, knees pulled to her chest. The perspective is from inside the mirror, as if someone is watching her from the other side. Another sketch is just a hand reaching across a hallway. The fingers are delicate, open, like offering help. But the one that wrecks me is the simplest. Two girls, sitting on opposite ends of a tiled floor, a line drawn in chalk between them. Neither crosses it, but both are smiling. I close the folder and lean back in my chair, my heart's in my throat. We thought the girl testifying today was an anomaly, a ghost, a blurry figure in the background of family photos. But these files tell a different story. She wasn't a shadow. She was a shield. She got the twin out. She watched the doors. She broke the rules quietly so someone else could breathe. The judge needs to see this. Package the sketches, make a note to deliver them directly to the lead investigator. This isn't about rebuttal prep anymore. It's about undoing the lie they built. Because if she was invisible to the court, it's because someone made her that way. Not because she didn't matter. And if the court finally sees her not just as a witness, but as someone who kept the others from falling apart, then maybe, just maybe, we'll understand who she really was in that house. Not a child, only a dependent. Find a protector. Chapter 6. Collapse. The courtroom had been quiet for a long time. Not silent like before a verdict, not tense like before a fight. This quiet had a texture, like something thick had wrapped itself around the walls. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed dimmer, like they were holding their breath. The sketchbook sat on the table, closed now. Her hands rested on top of it, fingers relaxed, not clenched, not trembling. She hadn't moved in over 15 minutes, not since the recess began. Diddy sat at the defense table, shoulders rigid. His back didn't touch the chair. His palms pressed against his thighs, as if trying to ground himself through the fabric of his suit. His lawyer had whispered something to him a few minutes earlier, but he didn't respond, just stared straight ahead, blinking slow and shallow. There was water placed next to him, untouched. The door behind the bench opened. The judge returned, followed by two marshals. One stood near the defense, one near the gallery entrance. Their posture had changed since the morning, more squared, more present. Then came the voice. "Your Honor." permission to enter supplementary evidence as cause for modification of existing charges. The lead investigator stepped forward, holding a padded folder. Inside was a blueprint, aged, creased, corners marked by handling. They slid it gently onto the bench and removed a second sheet beneath it, a photocopy of a sketch. The two were placed side by side. Everyone in the room leaned forward, even those who were supposed to remain neutral. The sketch, drawn in pencil, showed what looked like an altar. Not religious, something technological. A shrine made of stereo equipment, cables fanned out like roots beneath it. Above the structure, written in a child's hand, Control Tower. The components were labeled Receiver Core, Volume Crown, Silencer Deck. A circle drawn in chalk around the whole thing. The blueprint beside it was nearly identical, pulled from Diddy's seized studio raid, labeled in engineer's script, components matching word for word. Only one phrase differed. Where the sketch read Control Tower, the blueprint called it Harmonic Chamber A. There was no noise in the room, not even a cough, just that awful stillness, the kind that fills a space when everyone is realizing the same thing at the same time. Diddy shifted in his seat, slightly at first. A hand twitched, then a knee, then both legs moved under the table like he needed to stand but couldn't find the timing. His breathing changed, shallow, fast, but no sound came from his mouth. His lawyer reached toward him. That's when he stood. Not abruptly, not with power, more like someone climbing out of a bed after a nightmare. He rose slowly, body angled, one arm still resting on the table for balance. He opened his mouth, no words. Then he said it, barely audible. His voice cracked. Able I weren't supposed to draw it. One step back, able to remember. And then he folded. His knees gave first, hitting the floor with a thud that echoed louder than anyone expected. He didn't faint. His eyes stayed open. He didn't scream. No shaking, no outburst. He simply crumpled, slow and deliberate, down onto the polished wood floor and began to rock back and forth like a man who had finally found a truth too sharp to hold. One of the marshals moved forward. The other took a step back to alert the hallway team. The judge didn't move. Not a blink, not a word. They just watched. Across the room, she sat still. The girl with the sketchbook. The one with no last name, no file, no history, at least not the kind that counted on paper. She didn't flinch, didn't stand. She simply closed the sketchbook. No words, no expression, just the soft thump of the cover sealing the pages shut, like locking a door that no one else would ever open again. And in that moment, something in the room shifted. The balance of power tilted. The courtroom that had once belonged to the man on the floor, the one who made everyone rehearse their silence, no longer listened to his voice. They were listening to hers now, even though she hadn't said a word. Chapter 7, Recorder Girl. I wasn't supposed to see the file. Not really. My name was on the clearance roster, yes, but only because I was shadowing a DOJ analyst for a larger series I'd been quietly investigating. Most journalists don't get this kind of access. Not to Tier 1 assets, not to runes that require 4 separate key codes and a biometric ping just to unlock the filing drawers. But my contact owed me a favor, and he knew I wasn't there to sensationalize anything. I was just looking for truth that hadn't yet been translated into language. That's what this file was. Something too real to print, too fragile to say out loud. It was labeled in red ink. Recorder Girl. Tier 1 memory asset. No birth name, no case number. Just that title, the kind that feels like a warning as much as a record. Inside the folder was a stack of documents that didn't follow any real bureaucratic format. Some typed, some handwritten. Some marked up in different colors, like they'd passed through more than a dozen hands before settling here. I started with the top sheet, Cross-sketch alignment report, audio wing/basement level/session chamber. It was a side-by-side. On one side, a scanned pencil sketch dated 2019. On the other, an FBI forensic photo from the 2024 studio raid. Both showed the same layout. 4 stereo speakers, a central pedestal, a coiled cord looping around the edges of the room like a snake made of copper. The sketch had a title scribbled at the bottom in shaky handwriting, "Where they made the sounds that stayed." The photo had a digital timestamp and an evidence marker. Room matched line for line. Page after page, the matches continued. Drawings that had once been dismissed as childish were now confirmed architectural layouts. A fire escape stairwell that had been drywalled over, a venting system beneath the guest theater, a mirror room where light came from one bulb filtered through smoked glass, creating a stage effect. She had drawn that mirror too, and labeled the audience seats behind it, only the ones who don't blink. Then came the staff notes, typed, anonymized, but dated. One of them read, "We all knew she was there. No one ever said it out loud. She was just around, quiet, always sketching. I thought she was part of the extended family. I even asked once, got told to mind the production flow." That's how they talked about her, like she was part of the set. Another, more direct. The quarter girl wasn't the problem. She was the reflection, the reason the mirror started breaking. We didn't know what she was keeping track of until it was too late. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. There was a QR code stapled to one of the transcripts. I scanned it on the department tablet. An audio file opened. Raw, shaky, clearly recorded under duress. The voice was low, male, sounded tired. You ever wonder why the mirrors got covered up? Not the cameras, the mirrors. They said it was for light control, but it wasn't. It was her. She saw everything from the wrong side of the glass. He used to joke that if she ever started drawing the reflections, we'd all be out of a job. We laughed, but she did, and here we are. The voice cut off abruptly. Static followed. At the bottom of the folder was a sealed envelope, thicker than the rest, no label, no classification stamp. I looked up at my contact. He gave a silent nod. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Not a printout. A real photograph. Slightly curved from age. The colors faded around the edges. The girl was smiling, holding her sketchbook in front of her like a trophy. The cover was torn in one corner. Her hands were ink-stained. She stood outside, sunlight in her hair. But it was what stood behind her that froze my breath. Diddy, blurred in the background, standing on what looked like a low stage or platform. His hands were raised, not waving. Performing. Mid-gesture, like someone about to say something rehearsed. On the photo, in the corner, written in uneven letters with a thick felt tip marker, was a caption. He told me to remember, so I did. I put the photo down carefully. That was the moment I understood. She didn't testify because she wanted revenge. She didn't come forward because she needed justice. You came because he asked her to remember, and she obeyed, not because she belonged to him, but because she knew memory was the one thing he couldn't control once it left his walls. He tried to choreograph everything, every party, every silence, every girl's smile. But memory, her memory, escaped before he could lock it away. And now the sketches weren't just drawings. They were evidence. They were the script he forgot he wrote. And she was the one who never missed a line. Chapter 8. She wasn't the daughter. She was the evidence. The request came through at 2:47 a.m. in an unmarked system task labeled Auxiliary Testimony Records, Cycle Finalization Protocol, no urgency tag, no contact trace. Just a flicker on the queue list of my terminal, like it had always been there. waiting for me to notice. I'm the archivist. I don't sit in the courtroom. I don't handle evidence. I don't prepare exhibits or sit in on deliberations. I sit 4 floors below, under dim motion-sensitive lights, managing what no one else wants to remember, but everyone's too scared to delete. I don't ask questions. I just maintain the cycle. Redact, encrypt, label, seal. But this folder, this one didn't have a case ID, no timestamp, no initials. It wasn't even in the indexed directory. I only found it because I was running a routine purge on old Tier 3 fragments, and it appeared between 2 auto-logged entries, one from a dismissed witness appeal, another from a routine subpoena denial. In between them, like a breath caught in the middle of a sentence. Order girl, final entry. The file didn't open like the others. It wasn't a PDF or a video or an audio clip. It was just a line of raw text, the kind used when data was first entered into the system. Unformatted, unfiltered, ancient by court text standards. A transcript, but with no speaker tags, no headers, no formality. I scrolled through it. At first, it read like a journal. Fragmented thoughts, bits of speech. Then names began to appear, not of people, but of places. White room, control tower, mirror loop. Phrases that had been redacted from most of the other files I'd processed over the last 6 months. Then the tone shifted. Recorder girl. Recorder compliant. Harmonic immunity. Subject displayed no disruption during prolonged frequency exposure. Memory tethering confirmed. Symbolic interpretation reliable. Initiate memory loop. Cycle complete. I froze. These weren't case notes. They were observations, protocols, the kind of language used not for witnesses but for test subjects, for data, for experiments. I looked back at the directory, still blank. No metadata, no sender. Just that one file, blinking in isolation. Then my screen flickered. At first, just a flash. A split-second dimming of the monitor. But then it stayed, glitched into a half-minute, pixels trailing like water down glass. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, leaned in. What I saw wasn't my desk. It was tile, pale, smooth, a spotlight overhead, casting a tight white circle on the floor, and in the middle, a table, a chair, and someone sitting in it. Drawing. It was her, head down, sketchbook open, pencil in hand, calm, focused, like she'd done this before, like she never left. And somehow, impossibly, I was seeing from the inside. The reflection in the screen didn't show my tired face. It showed hers, watching me but not startled, like she had been waiting for this moment, like I had just arrived in a place I'd always been meant to reach. The terminal beeped again, a new message. Purge denied, loop initiated. He reached for the power button. The cursor began to move on its own, typed a single sentence into the blank line at the bottom of the transcript window. You archived their files, but who archives you? I stood up, backed away, my chair tipped over behind me. The lights above didn't respond. On the screen, the image changed. A photograph now. The same one I'd heard whispers about, the one no one could confirm existed. Her, smiling, sketchbook in hand. In the background, Diddy blurred mid-motor, like someone caught during a performance no one was supposed to see. And at the bottom, written in a child's handwriting, told me to remember. So I did. The screen faded to black. In its reflection, I no longer saw the white room. I saw a file cabinet open, my name on the folder inside, and then one final phrase, typed in white over the black screen. She wasn't the daughter. She was the archive, the memory they couldn't burn. The lights came back on, but I didn't sit down again. Some records aren't meant to be filed. Some stories file you.